Hi everyone, my name is Clemens Wan. I work for R3 as a solution architect. It's been a fun few days. We actually were here on Thursday and Friday with the Corda training course, the developer course, as well as attended a Corda meetup, which is hosted in Dallas. There was through Yana over there, and we can talk more about that later. So today I will be talking about the enterprise world. A lot of people here have been speaking about regulations for the public space, about scams, about ICOs, and that is the opposite of what I will be talking about, is how will enterprise companies be looking at blockchain and how have they already been participating. So this has been obviously a big topic that everybody's been thinking about, and I joined R3 about 2 years ago, and before that started the blockchain working group at Credit Suisse, and have been looking at this space for about 5 years. So I love the public space, but I looked at the specific enterprise space. And I did this presentation in Peru, where this was in November 3rd of 2017 with that all-time high number. And we know we broke that number all the way to around 19,000 and then crashed again. So as well as ICOs in general, there are some risk graphs that are associated with that, but we will not be talking about that at all. What I will be talking about is not that left side where you have tokens or any type of cryptocurrency that's publicly traded. That is the permissionless space. Permissionless being anybody can be a node. You can just start up the node and download the full set of transactions. That is something that has some regulatory uncertainty, and when R3 started about 2.5 years ago, all of the banks that were a part of the R3 membership were uncertain about that type of technology due to the regulatory uncertainty. So we looked at everything that was available at the time and started designing and building something fit for enterprise purposes. On the right side are 3 examples of the permission space, which means that you know exactly the nodes that are running this technology and what they're doing. And so these are the 3 open source versions that are out there that I'd like to talk about. There is Hyperledger Project, which is a broader project, a Linux Foundation project. They have something built by IBM, which was open blockchain and then submitted to the Hyperledger Foundation. It's called now IBM's Fabric or Hyperledger Fabric. JP Morgan built Quorum, which was a fork of Geth, so Go-based Ethereum, and then they built a layer on top of it for privacy specifically, and that has been submitted to Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, EEA. And Corda was built out of R3 for purposely our membership, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And this is for financial institutions, was based specifically on starting with a legal document. What is the life cycle of a legal document, and how is it privately shared between parties that need to see it? So why did we not want to look at cryptocurrencies? And I was part of the architecture working group back 2.5 years ago when we sat in a room with all these bank architects and spoke about cryptocurrencies and why we wouldn't use it. Number one is the anonymous actor route. So anonymous actors is a feature of blockchains, right? Anybody can start a wallet, anybody can have that private public key, but you already have a bank account and you already have a series of identities that are handed to you by governments and that are printed in passports and independently by states or by countries. So this has been something much broader as part of the Decentralized Identity Foundation, which R3 and many institutions are a part of, to do self-sovereign identity, where you control your identity. But that means having some level of a wallet that you can control and understanding the responsibility behind it. Other parts of cryptocurrency is that trust already exists in finance. You know the local bank account that you bank with, and most of it is shielded from you. So everything that the enterprise world looks at is the business-to-business space mostly. And everything that we've designed for is for B2B, which is usually not that sexy, right? Everybody wants to see the B2C use case so that you are the customer and you know how it affects you and how you can participate in it. What we were building was much more for that B2B space. Another big factor is privacy, resilience, scalability. If you want to install this application, imagine a blockchain being installed in a bank. How would you do that? I know a lot of our member banks actually do have internal blockchains that they use for replacing the internet, more or less, Web3 inside of your bank and being able to program and work with that. But how do you open that up to other banks? How do I rely on another bank for disaster recovery? If I ping this other bank, can I have all my transactions be stored. And another big factor of it is, how do I know that the anonymous actors that are a part of it is not part of some terrorist foundation, or how do I do the whitelisting for OFAC foundations? Energy consumption, only because in the permissionless space we have all heard about the proof of work and the amount that is needed for that level of consensus. And we'll be talking a little bit about Corda and how it solves for that. And finally, just generally, I think there has been some statistics around having a public-facing series of open source code in smart contracts, and who's going to maintain it, who's doing the bug bounties for it, who's doing the review of it, and is it really like a hacker's, their fantasy of being able to see the code and see the execution and also download all the transactions. The main parts of the distributed ledger or blockchain field that everybody's looking at is fairly clear. You have the cryptography, non-repudiation and mutability of an actual asset that's being moved around. You have the smart contracts business logic and the shared ledger as well, and then the part about distributed consensus. So when R3 came around, we were looking specifically at one big problem, which was, in the existing world, there's a lot of reconciliation that's done between banks. All these same systems that doing the same thing that is built for purpose for specific product lines. There are all actually a lot of manual labor involved, maybe opening mail or keying in the same thing with fat finger problems in all of the aspects. The thing that we were solving for was a shared view. So the guarantee of what I see is what you see, and that what we've negotiated has been true across the layers. And so you have these silos of banks right now, and our specific problem was to solve for the negotiation and staying updated of those legal documents between banks. And so that is not just doing a series of your own steps, but sharing those steps together and deploying the steps together. There is a video on Corda. I don't know if it's going to play. It would be nice if it does. Maybe it will play. Maybe it won't. That's okay. I can talk about it. So what is Corda and where did it come from? Corda was actually a project, and I worked on the project with R3 and Barclays. It was called the Smart Contract Templates. And the idea behind it, and the reason why I want to talk through it, is it does make sense on why we built it. It starts with an is the template for an interest rate swap, and the idea was to highlight different fields within the legal prose of that template and be able to create a metadata smart contract out of it that had different rules on how that legal document evolved over time. So that legal asset was shared between multiple parties, and every time there was an action that had to occur, like a coupon payment, all of that was shared only point to point with the parties involved in that legal document. So it dealt with negotiation, issuance, and then asset evolution of that document. And so with Corda, and the reason why we built it was to fulfill that need of point-to-point communication and getting rid of, and not storing that data everywhere, but specifically informing those involved of the evolution of that legal document. And so what has come around is it doesn't just apply to financial instruments. It's not just a specific to interest rate swaps. It's any type of legal document, bilateral, multilateral agreement. So this applies to insurance, where most insurance IT companies are not that large, and they have a lot of manual labor involved there. It also applies to trade finance, where there are letters of credit that are passed around, a lot of manual reconciliation as well. And so we were specifically trying to solve for that problem. And that looks like, in the general post-trade world, just general reconciliation. It's somebody keying in a document, reading something that's in a different format, and then saving it in some way. And what we're really normalizing is the standards of how those documents are saved, as well as how do you evolve those documents over time between parties. One of the unique features to Corda is the cross-interoperability with different industries. So we have three broad main themes that we've dealt with in the use cases we've built with banks. And we've done over 100 proof of concepts with our member banks and partners. And they've covered mostly, I would call them, digital identity, digital assets, and digital cash. and they have been covered in these different industries. So trade finance is a good example that we use because it is fairly manual at the moment. There is a letter of credit where you require these documents from carriers. It involves different people signing out on it, signing off on it, and then also revealing that you can move that particular piece of money for the exchange of goods, the physical exchange of goods in a supply chain. But there may also be insurance involved, so there may be insurance contracts that overlap with that. And the reason why we dealt with digital assets, it's not real money unless it connects to a bank account that has real money in it. It's not a real asset unless it connects to a legal document that has dispute resolution and people can know who to sue and know who to work with. So we have associated everything with real assets and connected them to the real banking systems. I like to give this analogy, and it's not just because Microsoft has been a longtime partner of R3, but this kind of goes with our strategy overall with the platform. So some of you are playing Xbox, and they have this console that you purchase, and you have that at home, and you're able to buy different games for that console. You're able to connect with other people to play the games with that console as well. And that's kind of what we're doing with Corda. So Corda is the open source protocol that it's been open source for about a year and a half. R3 Corda is our mission critical enterprise version that will be on premises installed at all of our member banks and all the different partners that are involved. So they will own a node themselves. Corda Connect is the network in which all of these R3 Corda nodes will interact with each other. And the Corda apps, or the Corda decentralized applications, are the games that are being built. And R3 specifically pivoted from a general lab into a platform company that supports different partners in the enterprise space to build these games for our members and to solve for specific problems. It's not just a general platform. It is to solve and integrate with existing systems. The main features that we did focus on, and a lot of people will go through these same talking points, so I won't belabor it, but it is around the same features that are in public blockchains. We just made it built for purpose and built for enterprise. And we're creating new work opportunities for developers. It's written in Java. It's written with Java components. It is actually, the back end is in Kotlin, which is a version of Java, but any of the smart contracts you write, as long as it compiles to the JVM, you can use it. It uses a relational database. The open source version has H2 as an in-memory database instead of the more Oracle or SQL or Postgres, but we do have that for the R3 Corda version for licensing. And it also uses MQ messaging. So it is point-to-point messaging. It doesn't use Gossip Network, and it doesn't do full broadcast of systems. This is the year of production, and there are applications going to production very, very soon in the coming months. And I think this has been really the journey that I took is from actually 2014, creating my own coin and kind of looking through this. There was a big year of hype, a big year of the price fluctuations, but also enterprise has been looking at this for probably the past 3 or 4 years. Credit Suisse was looking at this back in 2013, and I think Bank of England was one of the first ones that spoke about, it's not about Bitcoin, it's about the underlying technology, and that's why we're all here. In 2016, we've done quite a bit of POCs. We were, as a membership, an open lab, so we did a lot of work on Ethereum, and we wanted to find the use cases that could actually go live, because going live is much better than just having a bunch of POCs, right? You want to actually see how it's governed. It's not just deploy it and then let's just see what happens to it. It's actually, how do I support it? Who are the people who will pay for it? Who are the people who do I call if I lose my keys or something of that sort? All of these support lines that come from banks and come from enterprise editions are really what you're looking for. The year of the pilot was last year, so we made a lot of connections with different partners that already have existing market infrastructure in these banks, and we gave them Corda to solve for a lot of their problems, to connect their software to each other. And 2018 is the year of production, so we will have applications going live, and I'll talk about a few of those now. In addition to that, the partner network is quite is quite extensive. So it's not just the member banks. We have over 100 different institutions in our network currently, and over 70 plus that are in our partner network. But the main ones here are the ones that are supporting the infrastructure side of things. So Microsoft has given us full Azure credits to support our Corda network. Intel has something called SGX, which is a secure enclave of the processor. And HPE has their own technologies that are already in all of the banks. So they have something called Nonstop, which does the disaster recovery to make sure that all these applications are supported properly. So what's going live? If you follow R3 or Corda, you'll see a lot of press releases every day, and we have a Twitter handle, and you can follow that, but I'll talk about the first 3 that I think will happen this year. One of them is Finastra. They've announced LenderCom. This has been done with major banks, and the idea behind this is really in the deployment. So LoanIQ, Finastra is the broader company that was Mises and D&H. It merged into Finastra. Mises has LoanIQ, which anybody in the banking world dealing with syndicated loans, that is their main core banking platform for syndicated loans. And so they built something called LenderCom, which is the connection of all of their LoanIQ platforms across all of the 2,000 plus institutions that they have this installed in. And so the goal is to have all of those institutions install Corda nodes and be able to communicate with each other so reconciliation of the ownership of those loans would not be as difficult. And I believe Finastra has been doing quite a few press releases, but also quite a few road shows. So if you want to look up Finastra, LenderCom, and speak with them, I'm sure they'd be interested. Okay. And I think in all of these partner examples, this is an easy way to deploy because all of these banks already have these systems inside of their firewalls, right? And what we're doing is we're adding our own SLAs for Corda itself as a platform, but it's still being exposed by the real systems that they have installed. So they're extending their SLAs, service level agreements, to support these applications. And it's also making their life easier for vendor deployment and for upgrades of their systems. Calypso is another one. This is for FX matching. The technology of Corda is the way that I see it, is a middleware. So it actually has these things we call states that evolve over time. So it's like a state machine. And if you look at states and how you can construct transactions, we do the same thing as many of these cryptocurrencies do. We focus on transactions, which are changes to these states. We have with Calypso this FX matching engine, which essentially means that currently you have all these siloed positions where your trader may have a slate, one side of the transaction, and your customer may have another side of the transaction, and there is a ton of work that is done in the middle and back office to reconcile the movement of that trade being signed off. And so, people spend a lot of money on reconciliation, and what they've done is they've centralized this using Corda, being able to communicate with each other and being able to upgrade and update that trade FX match as well as the pricing associated to it within a single atomic transaction. And atomic transaction being that you do not need to roll back these transactions. Once all parties sign and understand that this is the change I'm making to the database, that is what has occurred. And so that's how we're removing reconciliation from a lot of these applications. Another one is TradeIX, which is around trade finance, and this is ripe for disruption because supply chain is a big piece of it. A lot of the other enterprise-grade institutions are looking at supply chain specifically, but I believe that that relies a lot on IoT and the change of operations because it's just agreeing on the tech, right? If you all agree on the tech, then you can probably use the same tech to upgrade and update that information. I only have 2 minutes left? Okay. Okay, so this is our network. We started off with 42 banks, and we have extended 3 minutes. That's great. We have expanded to 100 plus institutions. It started with financial institutions, but then it expanded to insurance companies and now regulators. And we've started a legal center of excellence as well. And these groups are looking at standards. They're looking at how do they actually install it inside of their bank and how do they get to production soon so that they can obviously change their own existing systems. There's a lot of technical debt that it's involved, and there's a lot of coordination with the real architects working at these banks. We did pivot from an open lab into a funded company. So I was employee 20, and now we're over 180 or so in the past 2 years. And we raised a Series A of 107 million that was not from VC money, but from all of our member banks. So we had 44 member banks from $1 to $5 million, and they all pitched in to help us build the platform Corda. And that's because it was built for purpose and built to improve their applications. The way that we were successful, and this is something I coined consortium-driven delivery, all of these member banks are competitors to each other. So why would they work with each other? And that's because R&D departments in the past have always been shielding a lot of this technology, but you can't do this technology in a vacuum, right? If you do it in a vacuum, you'll wind up with different standards, and you'll wind up with a lot of different protocols, more or less. And so if you want to build something together, you'll have to open up your IP. And the way that we worked and the way that we were able to complete the 100+ POCs was through something like this, which is we had a project board. We looked like a global incubator for all financial institutions. One bank, I was a developer at Credit Suisse and helped build that program, but I didn't have other developers to speak with. So after joining R3 and after joining the consortium, we were able to speak with other new developers at other banks. And we all worked on a single project for 3 to 4 months, and a team of 5 banks, each providing 1 developer for 4 months. That's kind of like a startup in itself. So we were really helping the entire enterprise community to build real applications and also to test out which POCs would their business purchase, right? So in order for this to be real, your product line at your business will have to give you $3 to $5 million to make the replacement. And so we started from the very beginning in 2016 doing this model and completing as many projects as possible and sharing the code, sharing the results, and sharing all the completion reports using Agile, little a Agile, but basically bringing fintech to all of these banks. This is our partner network. So we have delivery partners. These are people that are hiring Corda developers and are building on Corda. We have partner solutions, who are people that will essentially host and monitor these solutions that they're creating. And then kind of in the classic realm, you have the RFP and the statement of works that everybody thinks about. A traditional bank will likely say, let's join together and write an RFP. We know the business side of things. Let's hire Accenture or Deloitte to do the work for us. Let's put a number on it like $5 million and let's execute the RFP. R3 as a whole, working with Corda, we provide technical services to support our delivery solution partners to bid with Corda as the main platform. And I've been personally a part of 10+ different RFPs, and I think we've been doing this globally for quite some time. And so finally, what do we do is we are this middle layer within R3 and within Corda, not just as the network effect of, at first it was some level of FOMO, right? If my bank says I'm doing this and I don't do it, and I've spoken with R3, then what's going on? So we did get a lot of banks from the FOMO side of things, but now I think everybody's taking it seriously. They obviously had to diversify their own internal portfolio, so they have been working with other companies in the private space as well. But what we're really doing is we're trying to edge out the specific POCs, get them to pilots, and then match the execution side of things, which comes from partners. I mean, a bank itself isn't going to hire 100 people to execute integration, which could take 6 to 18 months. They are going to pay up the money to do that. And each bank, since this is a decentralized application, needs to use the same application, needs to figure out their integrations with their banks. So this is pretty serious stuff. It's not like an app store on your phone where you can just look at a bunch of Corda apps and then download it and there you go, it's installed. There's a lot of legal process behind it. And R3 is just acting as this middle layer and providing opportunities for different developers, Java developers, Kotlin developers to get involved in this space. So from the Corda training, there will be certification of that training, developer certification, and then from there, there are opportunities to be hired by these companies to do Corda work. And so finally, this is just rounding out our offerings and kind of working with R3 is we do provide these services in order to really change the competency curve of blockchain in general and how a bank can create strategies for that. And it's been a great journey, right? 2 years, and all these banks have really shared a lot of their previous ideas, and then there's always turnover. Somebody from a director from some incubation group has left and started their own startup or something like that. But I think it's a good point, because a bank is not just one group. It's usually hundreds of groups. And so we wind up with this, creating communities and informing people, going up to the C-suite side, coming back down to the architects, going to the traders directly, and figuring out which applications they can upgrade, maybe for regulatory purposes, and maybe for other, maybe new markets that they want to create. And that's it. You can contact us, partner at R3 or engagements at R3, and we can filter through your emails to see how we can work together.
Thank you, Clemens. We're going to take a couple of questions, and just a few questions, and then we'll take a break.
Thank you. So with the technology moving so fast, there's still going to be individuals in banking that still require reports, printouts. What kind of exports of the data can they obtain?
Yeah, so the great thing is this is the bank's Corda node. They will own it. They have full access to the database. It's a relational database, so they can use the existing reports. So you can probably connect it to Crystal reports or any type of business management reports. And it's meant to be their own ownership of that node. All we're doing with the Corda protocol as a middleware is guarantee when I want to share a fact with somebody else, I'm sending it and people are signing off on it.
My question is, there are a lot of banks that, a lot of banks, but I don't see any credit unions on there. I'm a member of a credit union, and I'm assuming that all of these banks eventually are going to have the option for us to convert our money, right? What's going on with credit unions, and if they are, is it a government type of thing with the credit unions that's not partnering?
And we've spoken with credit unions, we've spoken with a lot of groups, and what happens is people see R3 and they're like, oh, you are a bank of consortium, a consortium of banks specifically, and credit unions actually created their own consortium themselves and have their own committee to choose which technology to go with. And we're not forcing anybody to pick any technology. I think it makes sense to start with the core services of the big banks that want to move in a particular product line, and so it will. Yeah, please, follow-up question.
No, and I'm saying the big guys are jumping onto it. The big guys are jumping onto it, so I'm assuming that credit unions eventually will get on it when they see it's not so volatile, I guess, right?
I guess so. It's hard to have early movers. They don't want to get burned by the technology either, so maybe they're more conservative. But banks do have innovation groups, and they're on the line for giving a good blockchain story, so they've joined R3 to support that. Yes?
Yes, my question has to do with syndicated loans. You mentioned that there was a lot of inefficiencies with the trade settlement of the syndicated loans, and sometimes it takes days because of the manual work. I actually heard a presentation from Symbiont, and they're doing something that's similar. So I was wondering the difference between your platform and what Symbiont is doing.
Symbiont, I know the guys. I worked with them while I was at Credit Suisse, and it was a big story. I actually built syndicated loan platforms and worked on that. They're partnering with iPrio and they started a new joint venture called Synapse. And what they're solving for is something very similar. They're using iPrio's platform, and their backend is a traditional Bitcoin blockchain with another layer of smart contracts on top of that. And actually they hosted an R3 project that we had, and we were able to have some of our banks join that while we were in 2016 just an open lab for banks before Corda came around. So syndicated loans is actually not all about the settlement, and a lot of people, the 43 days or 20-something days, a lot of it has to do with manually printing something out, reading it. It's $100+ million is a big loan, and then sending that off to 100 people giving you $1 million means that all of those parties have to sign off. What we were trying to create was something called agent in a box, which means all the functions that an agent bank does could be automated and created with smart contracts. And I believe Symbiont and Synapse, they did the same thing as well.
So you're kind of collaborating with them, or are they your competitors?
They are creating their own product that's specific to syndicated loans. And R3 and Corda is a platform that anybody can build on top of. So when we were a lab, we actually did work with them quite a bit. And it's exciting to see, this technology being adopted. It's all about standards and governance. So ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And who's going to host the nodes? What are the rules for being added to a permission network? It really doesn't have to do with the blockchain buzzword tech.
And that's all the time we have today for questions.
Oh,
If
feel
you
free
have
to contact
any
me. I'll be
more-
walking around, and so.
Yes. So let's give a round of applause for Mr. Clemens Wan. We're going to take a